Welcome to Honest HR, where we turn real issues facing today's HR teams into honest conversations with actionable insights. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Monique Akanbi. What if the biggest thing holding your HR team back isn't a lack of skill, but a lack of curiosity? Today, we're exploring the power of curiosity in the workplace, what fuels it, what holds it back, and why it might be the missing piece in your HR culture and strategy. Joining us is Dr. Diane Hamilton, behavioral expert and creator of the Curiosity Code Index, an assessment that identifies the factors that block curiosity at work. Welcome to Honest HR, Dr. Hamilton.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Monique. I'm just so passionate about curiosity. I think this is going to be a great show.
At SHRM, one of our guiding principles is being smart and curious, asking the right questions, listening with intention, and striving to understand before jumping to conclusions. Diane, I imagine that resonates with your work. So, how did curiosity first land on your radar as something worth exploring? And why is curiosity such a critical yet overlooked driver of organizational success?
Well, that's such a great question. And, it's so interesting that I ended up writing about curiosity because I never really thought about doing that. I had written my dissertation on emotional intelligence, so I'm very interested in behavioral issues. But it was when I had my radio show that I started to interview all these really interesting people. I mean, from everybody from billionaires to Daniel Goleman or you name whoever was popular in any kind of business setting, I interviewed them. And I started to notice that they had this thing in common. They were super curious, and that's what made them successful. I also teach online, and I teach a lot of different students who seem to want me to give them the fish instead of teach them to fish. And I saw a big difference. And I thought, well, the big difference really was they were needing to develop their curiosity. So as I started to write a book on curiosity, because I wanted to fix this situation, I got about halfway through it and I realized, well, this is just going to be a book on curiosity. I want to fix it. I want to solve this problem. So I realized I needed to create an assessment to do that. And that wasn't out there. I didn't realize that no one had done that, like what they'd done with emotional intelligence. And when I had interviewed Daniel Goleman, we talked about this, and he was saying, curiosity is the competency of the future, and we need this. It's such a critical, yet, as you mentioned, overlooked driver of organizational success. So I set out to do that. I hired a bunch of people to work on this, and they just kept giving me the same old assessment that was out there that would just tell you if you were curious or not, like what your levels were. And that didn't really tell me what was stopping it. So I worked on this for many years and finally did it on my own. I had to take my own advice, get curious, and start figuring out the fun statistics stuff that goes behind all of that. And I created my Curiosity Code Index that you mentioned. And it's so important because curiosity, I mean, as I studied this, I recognized that curiosity was the spark to everything organizations were trying to fix: innovation, engagement, motivation, you name it. It all came back to that.
So I think about when I practiced HR, and oftentimes, for me, I always led with curiosity. I don't know if it was just me being nosy, but I always wondered what made people, like, what was the driver of people. And I just would look at certain things either someone said or did, and I just really wanted to get to the root cause of it, right? So that made me curious. But oftentimes there's this fine balance in the workplace around curiosity and challenging, right? Because sometimes being curious can be perceived as challenging. If workplaces say that they want to value curiosity, what does that look like in practice?
Well, it's really interesting because I've worked with so many big names like Verizon or Novartis or you name them, and they all do it in a different way. Novartis, well, let's start with Verizon. Verizon sent me to New York and we created these videos where they had me talk a little bit about curiosity and the value of it, but then they showcased their employees who had utilized curiosity to become super successful within the company. And I remember one of the women that came on to say how well she did in the company came from Mexico, where the culture wasn't really pro women becoming in leadership positions, and she was hesitant to take that role. So she talked about how she told her leader at the time that she didn't feel comfortable doing it, and then they really helped walk her through the value of curiosity and how she could do it, and they were going to be there to support her. So they would take these videos and play them in their onboarding sessions, and they played them throughout their stores, and they did all this to showcase, this is what we want. We want curious people, and we're not just saying it as something in a blurb somewhere that we care about curiosity. This is the culture of the company. I mentioned Novartis. They're another big company I've worked with that they would did it differently. They would pay for 100 hours a year of educational credits for students. Their employees could take online or whatever they wanted to do. They even had Curiosity Month, where they'd have hundreds of people like me come in and speak, and then their employees could pick what they wanted to learn and what they wanted to do. And they'd have employees actually give talks about things they were passionate about, because there's no better way to learn something than to teach it, right? So they would learn, and then they would share, and other people would learn. So in each organization, I mean, whether it was LinkedIn, doesn't matter who I worked with, they did it in a slightly different way. But the most important thing was that leaders emulated what they wanted to see, and they weren't afraid to ask questions themselves.
Right. I think about in the value of curiosity and how that unlocks, you just said it, it unlocks innovation, right? It really opens that door of exploration to maybe some things that we may not have thought of, especially if we're thinking about a new service or a new product or a strategy on how we make our organization better. What role does curiosity play in helping HR build inclusive, adaptive teams, especially during times of change or disruption?
I had a great conversation with Amy Edmondson about teams and teaming, and she has a really wonderful TED Talk about how they got the Chilean miners out from under the rock years ago, and how they were all able to work together to do that. And they utilized curiosity to be collaborative. They had to let their egos go. People's lives were at stake, right? And they had all these people who'd never met each other had to work together in a situation that was really highly stressful. So we know that we have to let go of thinking we have all the answers. When I've trained companies, teams in the past, I'm sure your audience, of HR professionals have done a lot of DISC and emotional intelligence or Myers-Briggs or whatever types of training. We know that when you put people together that are more diverse of background, maybe more introverts with extroverts, or, intuitives with, the different groups, right? And you put them together, you ask them to build a house out of Legos, they're going to build a much more interesting house out of Legos than they are if they're all the same. And that was really fascinating to me. So you have more issues when you have different people on a team in terms of how they get along. Sometimes you get a much more innovative product. And the more you get this diverse group of people, the more people question each other and go, well, why would, because it's not intuitive for them to do something a certain way where it is to somebody else. So there's no better reason to develop curiosity sometimes than to be collaborative in a team environment, because we have to know, well, where did you come up with that idea? Because a lot of these companies their people stay stuck in their cubicle or in their silo or in their own mind of thinking a certain way. And when we get outside, especially the companies that go to outside industries and get ideas, I've seen hospitals go to race car teams to get ideas. And there's just so much more we can learn from questioning. And that helps with so much with collaboration and teaming.
So, Diane, of the 4 inhibitors you've identified, which are fear, assumptions, technology, and environment, how do they typically show up in organizations as it relates to curiosity?
Well, it was very interesting to study this because I assumed fear was going to be a big one, because people are often afraid of being embarrassed, losing control, looking unorganized, all those kinds of things. It comes up in that fear of failure often. Assumptions was interesting to me because it's really the voice in your head that I'm not going to be interested in this. I did this in the past. It wasn't helpful. It's not necessary. And technology was more about over and underutilization of it. Maybe it does it for you. You're not trained. You're overwhelmed by it. And environment is more about everybody with whom you've ever had interactions. So your educators, your family, your friends, your workers, your peers, your current boss, your past boss, everybody.
So let's unpack each of those inhibitors just a little bit more, and starting with fear. So in HR, we see how fear of judgment or failure or even job loss can shut people down, right? What are some practical ways HR teams can help reduce fear and create a psychologically safe environment, and not just a theory, but day to day?
Well, fear is something that you just don't know where it came from. Sometimes it's a past boss. I had a guy I worked for who, I asked him a question about something he wanted me to do I'd never done before. And he said, well, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. And I asked him the question. Wow. And what does that tell you? It tells you, don't ask questions, or you're an idiot, or whatever it tells you. It means we don't want to know if there's a problem. So to reduce fear, we have to model what we want to see. And I've worked on DocuSign's board of advisors and these great boards where I've seen some of these leaders who are so good at being humble. They just say, I don't know everything. I hire people who know things I don't know. We have to model what we want to see. It's going to be a big thing right now with AI. I speak to a lot of groups about fear of AI because I used to sell computers in the 80s and everybody freaked out back then thinking they're going to lose their jobs, that the internet was taking over, and it does reduce jobs. It does change jobs, but it creates new jobs. And everybody's in this sense of what's going to happen next. And it's very challenging. So a lot of it is just giving people time to experiment, to play around, to look at it at one bite at a time instead of like overwhelming. I used to make fun of that kind of thing with my doctoral students because they had to write these 200-page papers, for their dissertation. And I said, well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And it's just to play with them. It's goofy, but it's true. We have to do little bits of things. We have to give people just a chance to not, drink from the fire hose. And I think with fear right now, especially with AI, that's one of the ways. You have to find out what they fear. And that's what I work with organizations to do. When they take my assessment, they find out, is it fear of this, that, what is it? Because if you don't know what they fear, you can't just put a big Band-Aid on it.
So the second inhibitor is assumptions, and assumptions can kill innovation before it starts, right? So how can HR help workplaces unlearn the idea of we've always done it this way, especially in legacy organizations or industries that are resistant to change?
Well, it's something that comes up a lot in organizations where they don't ask the question of why have we always done it this way? Did we do it in the past and we failed? Or did somebody tell us it was going to be too hard? Or have we been trained to believe that this is something bad? And you don't know what people have in their heads. Assumptions, sometimes when I'm in front of a group, I'll hold up a thing of water and I'll say, how much does this weigh? And people yell out 8 ounces or 10 ounces or whatever. And then I said, well, the truth is it doesn't matter. It matters how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute, it doesn't bother me. Hold it for an hour, my arm gets tired. Hold it all day, my arm gets paralyzed. Assumptions are the same thing. And when we're in the work setting and we assume that we can't do certain things a certain way because they're going to shut us down. I see this a lot with project managers. They want to get to the end fast, and they don't want any distractions. But when we have that, we get the Boeing situation where we find out about software issues, but we don't want to rock the boat, and then we end up with these horrible outcomes. And so we have to let people recognize what are they telling themselves? What's in their mind that makes them think that AI is going to be the bad thing? Or what's in their mind that thinks that they can't ask a question because they're going to get people off track? So just like fear, there's all these other sub factors of assumptions of what we're telling ourselves.
So, Dr. Hamilton, recent SHRM research explores how technology is reshaping HR roles and found that the demand for tech skills has increased 23% from 2023. And while technology streamlines our work, sometimes it also can limit opportunities for deeper thinking and exploration. So, how can HR professionals leverage tools like AI and automation without letting them dull those critical thinking skills and stay curious?
Such an important area of research, actually. Along with your SHRM research, MIT did some research showing that people who were really ahead of their time and were great critical thinkers didn't grow that much if they used AI. But the people who weren't that great of critical thinkers actually got better. And they looked at that and they wanted to see why. And a lot of it was because you just started to rely on it so much that that they didn't grow much more because they kind of thought, well, it's doing what I know it can do. Where if you weren't really great at AI and knowing all these things, you started to learn a little bit more. So we have to learn that technology, in terms of curiosity, is about over and underutilization of it. We need to have high tech days and low tech days. We need to learn the foundation behind the technology so we know why it works. We have to know, like with AI, how to create the prompts that give you the best data and why that works that way. If you just totally rely on what it spits out, you're going to get sadly disappointed because a lot of the times it gives you just what it thinks you want to hear. So if you're not critically thinking about your output that you're getting from technology, you might just go down a rabbit hole that isn't even real. It's just some kind of a hallucination that technology gives you. So this is a time where we have to teach people the basics behind how the technology works, as well as once they get that, they understand how to use it to its fullest. You can't have one without the other. Either way, you're going to have issues. And that's why this curiosity development is so critical.
As we're talking, all I could think about as children, we're taught to be curious, and what popped in my mind was one of my favorite books, Curious George, right?
Yeah, right.
But then we become adults and we lose the very foundation of really what will help us even as adults and our professional lives as well, is how do we really leverage and capitalize on some of like the creativity and the curiosity that we were taught when we were younger in the workplace. What are some practical ways HR teams can really shape an environment where curiosity is a part of their day-to-day culture and not just a buzzword?
Environment is about a lot of the things you said. When you're a kid, your educators, your family, your friends, your workers, your peers, as you grow older, we know that kids get super curious where they're asking hundreds of questions a day, and then they hit about age 5, and then it starts to really diminish. It's very similar to what we see with creativity. And so that was really fascinating to me, because what can you do about your teachers not asking you questions now, or your boss saying something snarky to you a long time ago, or things that have now impacted your assumptions and your fear and all these other things. But you can find out what they were, what these issues were, so that you can develop this environment that doesn't further cause more issues. So in the workplace, a lot of it is creating safe atmospheres where people can suggest ideas. We know Google had their 20% time rule where they can work on passion projects and all these things. We know all these companies have done these amazing things to ensure that people feel safe. I know in different realms, they come up with little packets of information sometimes to give people to say, here's your approval for an idea. You don't have to get it formally approved. Here's a credit card. Here's a whatever that's got a certain amount of money on it. And it creates the safety where they can come up with these ideas that without having to go through formal networks where people might say no. So a lot of it is how we model it, a lot of it is recognizing what past experiences have done to people to make them shut down. And so that's the kind of thing that they find out. Again, there's different sub categories under environment, just as with the other factors of FATE, F-A-T-E, that once you recognize, oh, I didn't do this way because my family always wanted me to do this. I think it's really fascinating to see the aha moments I see in people's faces when they go, oh, that's why I don't do that. I used to like to do that. And so when you see that, it opens up new realms for them.
Yeah. What advice would you give HR professionals who want to bring more curiosity into their company, but their leadership isn't really on board? How would you advise them to address that or take on that challenge?
There's so many people who ask me about how do you develop curiosity if leaders aren't on board. And it's, to be honest with you, you got to think of curiosity like emotional intelligence, that the people who need it probably aren't going out and buying the books on it. That's the problem, right? And we want leaders to recognize, but, back to Daniel Goleman, when I talked to him, I think the reason emotional intelligence got to be where people were reading about it was he made it accessible and popularized it for the business world. So you had to be on board. And when I started to write about curiosity, I did a Google search set up to let me know when people had written about it, so I would learn more. And people weren't really writing about it at the time. And now I love to think it was based on my books on curiosity, but who knows what the reason is. There's more and more people writing about curiosity now. And so these leaders have to start to see that they need to get on board, just like they did with emotional intelligence, that this is a critical competency. But for not all of them do. The ones who contact me to come speak are usually the ones who get it, and they know they need to build this culture. But for the companies that don't get it, a lot of these leaders are going to be on their way out, to be honest with you. They probably won't make it very long, and especially with AI and everything right now. But you can make small movements from the bottom up if you can get other people on board. And if you do any kind of documentation to show your leader, hey, look, we were curious about this, and look at the financial impact it made. Because a lot of leaders want to see financial, quantitative information. And I did a research study recently where I interviewed 51 C-suite executives in all different levels, in all companies throughout the United States. And I asked them for this because if you look on the internet, there isn't data out there for these leaders who need that data. And what I asked them is, how much did you save from these curiosity-based initiatives? And over 80% of the small and medium companies saved over $100,000 a year. I didn't ask them if they saved more, but I wish I would have. Now I want to know how much they saved. And over 100% of the large companies saved over $1 million. So I don't know how much more on that one either. But it was consistent. CHROs, CEOs, COOs, every C, group I was in this. And so they were all very positive about this. So I was really pleasantly surprised to see more of an openness to this.
Yeah. Something we're starting to see over the past few years now has been burnout. And there's a critical issue surrounding employee burnout. How do HR professionals create a culture of curiosity when so many employees are just trying to make it through the day?
Yeah, I hear a lot of that. And you know what? It's really interesting because I worked for a company for nearly 20 years, and 15 years of it was in a job that I really wasn't well aligned to do. And I didn't love it. I loved working for the company, but I dreaded Mondays, to be honest with you. And now I just look forward to Mondays so much because I'm doing what I love to do. And a lot of it is that people are maybe not perfectly aligned to their passions. And we don't know that because we haven't asked them what they like. We haven't had them go throughout the company and try different things. We haven't explored their true curiosity. And that leads to this disengagement issue. I interviewed a guy named Dr. Olin Odakoven. He's since passed, but he was the most interesting guy. He was the CEO of Peregrine, which it was an education company. And he would go up to people in meetings or wherever he would, conventions, or he'd talk to people and he'd find something about them and he'd go, well, I want to hire you. And they say, well, okay, what's the job? He goes, I don't know yet. And,
Mhm.
and he would just create a job after, because he knew that they were great. He couldn't tell what they would be great at. And
Mhm.
obviously companies can't all do this, but it was very successful for him because he would bring them back and let them explore different areas of the company and align tasks and skill based on their skills. Now you might say, okay, well, but nobody's going to want to do the paperwork, or nobody's going to, not everybody loves every skill, right? But I loved paperwork and no one else did in that job. And, there's going to be people who love to do the things you think no one's going to love to do. So you have to kind of find out what are those things. And we're all going to have to do some stuff that we don't love. But if we can find out, maybe this person really needs to do more of this kind of thing, and this person needs to do more of that kind of thing. And we'll find out more, I think, as AI comes along, and then we can train them to build those skills.
So, what I gather from that is even when employees are burnt out or at the point of burnout, and as HR professionals, we have to model curiosity just to get them to a place beyond burnout because maybe they're in a place or a position where it's just not their place to thrive, right? It's not their area to thrive. And so we have to model curiosity to get them to a place of curiosity. Yes?
Well, there's that. And also to ask them more about what would they be
Yeah.
more passionate doing, and just have
Hmm.
more of a dialogue of finding out more so that we can be empathetic to their needs. And I think that, there's no better way to build empathy than through developing curiosity.
Yes. So, have you seen any standout examples of organizations or teams that truly embraced curiosity and saw meaningful results because of it?
Oh, there's just so many. I mentioned some that I've worked with that have had huge results. Novartis really moved the engagement needle, for example. Whether I've worked with LinkedIn or EO or US Bank. I mean, there's just so many companies. Google, of course, created Gmail because of it. I think Ben and Jerry's is an interesting example because you don't think of them as an innovative company because they make ice cream. I mean, that doesn't sound like it, but one of their most successful flavors came from just a suggestion board. I mean, you've had chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, I assume. I mean, I have and I
Yes.
love it. And that was just a suggestion board that they had. And it's, one of the most successful thing they did. They're also innovative in the fact that they retire flavors that don't work anymore. So a lot of companies hold on to products that are past their due date. People don't want it anymore, but they actually give them a funeral. If you go on their website, they have a little headstones and said, this flavor was popular from this year to that year. And I think that knowing when to look for ideas from your employees for potential products is really critical. And also knowing when to retire things that are no longer the good thing. That's why we have the Kodaks and the Blockbusters of the world, because they didn't want to give up on what worked, in the past. And if we don't continue to look at what's working, why do we need to keep going this way, and why should we maybe think of something else? That's where we can learn from these other companies.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, one last question. Any piece of advice or final words you would like to give our audience as we continue to embrace curiosity, but also turn our organizational culture into a place of curiosity?
Well, I think that just the fact that your audience is watching or listening to this right now is that they are interested. They are somewhat curious and they want to know how this can benefit them, which is a huge, huge first step. I think knowing what inhibits your curiosity is critical, because you can't just say you need to be more curious because you don't know why you're not curious. So that's what I work with companies to do. And I think that when companies start with recognizing, okay, here's where our curiosity level is, and then they compare that with their engagement, their innovation, all the things they're trying to fix, and then they find out what is inhibiting their curiosity in their people, then they can work on those things and remeasure again. all those levels. And that's what a lot the companies, like I mentioned before, have done. And they've really moved the needle because you have to realize that curiosity ties into the bottom line of productivity. And the sooner you work on that, on developing curiosity, the more empathetic people are, the more emotionally intelligent they are, more innovative, productive. And that's why it's so critical to find out now.
Well, Dr. Hamilton, thank you so much for sharing your deep insights and expertise around curiosity with our audience.
Thank you for having me. This has been very enlightening, and I love how curious you are.
Well, hopefully our audience will stay curious as well. That will be it for this episode. We hope to see you next time. Hello, friends. We hope this week's episode gave you the candid tips and insights you need to keep growing and thriving in your career. Honest HR is part of HR Daily, the content series from SHRM that delivers a daily newsletter directly to your inbox, filled with all the latest HR news and research. Sign up at shrm.org/HR Daily. Plus, follow SHRM on social media for even more clips and stories. Like, share, and add to the comments. Because real change starts with real talk.
SHRM.
This podcast is approved for zero.5 professional development credits, aka PDCs, toward SHRM CP and SHRM SCP recertification. Enter the following PDC activity ID in your SHRM activity portal to log your credit. 26-5RAE6. That's 26-5RAE6. This ID expires on September 1st, 2026.